Yeah, sure. So I don't know if I don't think it said in this particular bio, but I was an actor for 15 years in New York and regionally. And so I really, really understand what you're going through, what your questions are, the things that you just wish were true about our industry that are just completely unique about our industry. You know, I heard one of you's a software engineer, one of you's a sounds like a really cool PI or whatever you said you were, Rick. You know, those are really cool industries, and probably a lot of you work in other industries. And our industry is just super unique than anything else, which is why so few civilians who aren't actors, they don't understand, you know, how it works, and it can be so frustrating. You know, there's not the ROI. Who knows what an ROI is? If you're a business person, you know what an ROI is. There isn't the ROI, the return on investment in our industry in the same way that there is in other industries. You know, for example, so I know somebody who booked a one man show at the Geffen Theater, which is one of the most prestigious theaters in Los Angeles, if not the United States. It was a one man show. He was obviously the lead. It was a huge get for him. And how much do you think he made a week on that show? This was an equity show, headliner.
Two to 400.
He made 800 a week.
Oh.
Okay. This same actor was on a TV show in New York where he played like, you know, he was a co-star. He was on for the whole, you know, all many seasons, but he would like have one or two scenes an episode. For that show, each episode he made at least $1,000, if not like $1,500 an episode. Okay. So you can see, but if you had to ask him what was his dream, like what was the better role, he's going to tell you the one man show, right? Not just the little scene where he's like, "Hi, here's your file," right? So, but to the outside world, the more valuable show is the one that's paying him whatever, 1,200 a day, 1,500 a day, right? So we don't operate in the same world as the rest of the world, right? The return on our investment is our dream. So I guess what I'm saying is that we are a very, you know, unusual breed of people, you know, who want to do this. And obviously we want to do it all, right? Some of you say you're from the theater. Well, you know, I was from the theater too, but did I love booking a L'Oreal commercial that paid me 80 grand? Yes. You know, even though you didn't see my face in the commercial, you know, do I want, as an actor, you want to do stage, you want to do a TV show, you want to do a film, you want to do a video game. You definitely want to do a video game. Those are like the funnest jobs ever. You want to do voiceover, you want to do audiobooks, you know, you want to do industrials, which are those like corporate videos. Those pay great, right? So you want to be able to do it all. And nobody's just one kind of actor. You can't be in this industry. You can't. You will never survive if you're only one kind of thing. So those are just my thoughts. So I guess my point is that I was an actor, so I really understand what you're going through, and how it's so hard to understand how this business works. And is there a magic pill? Is there a magic class you can take? As good as a teacher as Tina is, there isn't. There is not a magic thing you can take. You just have to keep going, keep going. And what I really loved what Brad was saying, that he's coming back into the industry after many years away. You are so welcome here, right? Because for somebody like me, you know, when I cast a long running series, like, you know, 15 seasons of a show, I've run out of guys like you, right? So I'm like thirsty for the new, you know, mature, knows who he is kind of a guy who will play a co-star, who will play the grieving father of a victim, or who will play the businessman, or, you know, because other actors in your age range, Brad, who are super famous, aren't going to do that on my show. They're not going to be on NCIS. They're not going to be on Grey's Anatomy. They're not going to be on the long running shows, right? Because they get paid way too much money to play a co-star. So we're really thirsty and hungry for people in your age range, not just you as a male, but, you know, female, you know, anybody in that, you know, mature age range. We're really hungry for you because we want really good trained actors who can show up on set, be the grieving father, be the pissed off ex-husband, be the shop owner, be the business owner, and just nail it. We've got more than enough young people. We've got more. We've got, out of my ears, or 20s to 30s actors. We have less actors like you.
Well, I'm available.
Got it. Yeah. So that's my, that's what I can kick this off with.
So I was just wondering, based off what you just said, you said you got young actors coming out of your ears. So what would you say would be, just three things maybe that you look for? Because I know you're going as a casting director, you're probably going through tons and tons of auditions. So what can help you as a younger actor set you apart from a lot of what you're saying that you really look for?
Yeah. Yeah. So do you know the actor Tom Hardy?
Yes.
He's So he had a really great quote that I saw recently. He says there's only two kinds of acting, convincing and not convincing. So I wish I could give you three magic things. There aren't three magic things. There is one thing. Are you convincing or are you not? Now, the great thing is because you're in a region, right? You're in the Southeast region. And if I'm casting something, which I have, the last couple projects, the last series I worked on, as Tina knows, was shooting in the Chattanooga area. That is a much smaller pool than it is if I was able to job in LA and New York. Sometimes there are roles where I can job in anywhere, and sometimes there are roles that are budgeted just to be in that little pool, that community. So I'm looking for people who are convincing. So if I have a role that you would have been perfect for, maybe you submitted for it, a bike messenger, right? All you come in and you say, "Here's your package, sir." I have to 100% be convinced that this is what you do all day, every day. And you're just a kid who this is your part-time job. Like, I just have to believe the whole world of it. And you can't even imagine how hard that is for a lot of actors who make it seem like it's Hamlet, right? Who make it seem like it's going to be the star of this show, this little bike messenger coming in and saying, sign for this, please. We're looking for authenticity, for an effortlessness. Now, there could be other roles that were much more emotional, right? Maybe you're the brother of your sister is getting cancer treatment and it's not going well, and you're sitting in a waiting room and you're really upset and shaken up, and a doctor comes and talks to you. In that case, I have to 100% believe that you're a brother, that you have this history of she's been sick for so long and you're I just have to believe who the writer needs you to be, right? And I think a lot of actors get confused. There are some trainings, I'm not going to mention who, some of people that Tina knows, they kind of train you to be like, well, what do I want? Right? What's my motivation? What do I want? Now that's important, but what's more important is what did the writer want? Why did the writer write this scene? You have to be able to see that. Why this scene? Because the writer didn't have to write this scene, right? The writer could have written a scene where the doctor is having coffee with a colleague going, "Yeah, I talked to the younger brother. He's really shaken up." That didn't happen. They wrote the scene with the younger brother, right? So you have to recognize that. You have to do your script analysis. You have to understand what is your place in this world. What do I have to be believable about, right? And then you can do all the other things, all the other processes, however, whatever your process is. So the things that make people stand out are people who understand the assignment, right? And sometimes that can be being a little quirky, making it your own, putting a little bit of a zhuzh, a little bit of an improv at the end of it, a little bit of an improv at the beginning. That can be right. But the very first thing you have to do is convince me that you're a bike messenger, right? So that's something that it's just so interesting. Something that it sounds like what I'm saying is so simple. But believe me, when you get those scenes and it's your turn to audition and it's like, oh, I only have one line, I've got to make it like so important. I have to make this line to be or not to be, Um, so that's what stands out to me. People who are just so solid in their body, in their voice, in their relaxation, that they are just effortlessly embodying the role.
Question was pretty much what he was asking, just in like the arena of like the younger people and how we would be able to stand out compared to everyone else. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's only so much that you're going to be able to control. So
Mhm.
I was casting a movie last year. Um, that was shooting in Nashville, and it was like the lead was like a young 20 something girl who had lost her mom to cancer, and we had 5,000 submissions, right? You can't put that on your back to be like, how can I stand out from 5,000? You're just going to have to trust the process. And the key is if you are auditioning a lot, one of these things are going to hit. It's a numbers game. You can't just be having one audition and just be praying, praying, praying that that's the one that's gonna, like I have a really good friend. I have a couple friends who are doing really well right now, in spite of the fact that it's a total downturn in production. I mean, there's 20% less production happening right now, right? And even during the strike, these actors that I'm thinking of were booking. Why? Because they're submitted like 200 submissions, 100 self-tapes, and they booked 4 jobs. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, if you're a businessman, I know Brad's running the numbers going, wait a minute, 4 bookings out of 100 auditions, that's not that great. Are you kidding me? That is an amazing year. Booking 4 jobs, 4 network TV jobs is like insane. That's an insane year. But somebody in the business world is going to be like, that's like point percent achievement of your effort, right? But that's what you're up against. I mean, and so if you're not getting submitted 200 times, then you're not going to be booking. Then you're not going to get 100 requests for self tapes, and you're definitely not going to get any bookings. So that's kind of, you gotta pivot your perspective on how much you have to be out there. You have to be auditioning enough so that it's like, okay, here's my audition, done, worked on it. Maybe I had a coach, done, record, send it in. Next, forget about it.
It's Karen. Okay, Victoria.
Yeah, I put the hand up. I think it disappears.
Okay.
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 Thank you, Lisa. This is super helpful. I did have a question about, because I work on demo reels for actors, and I've always wondered about how much do you play to your brand? Like, just make that really strong. And especially when you're newer, you're trying to figure out what that is, versus how much do you, I want to show like 4 different types of characters. What sticks out to casting directors more?
What's a brand?
I would say, okay, so my example of that is, okay, smart brunette lawyer. Are they going to put me against, like, I'm not going to be in the same room with like a little petite blonde. You know what I mean? And so sometimes I wonder of like, do I play to that look that I kind of naturally carry, or do I go more like just like expand it so there's a broader reach of what I could play?
So my feelings about this are, what does the market want, right? What does the market want from anybody, right? What is casting right now? If there's a lot of hospital shows on, right? Do you have material that convinces me as the buyer that you can play a nurse, that you can play an EMT, that you can be in that medical world, right?
Mhm.
For a while there was like 10 vampire shows on, right? That's what the market wanted. So do you have something that's more moody, more cool, more goth, if that's what you do well, right? It doesn't do any good for you to have one of these bullshit procedural scenes where you're acting like you're a detective if you're not any good at that, right? If you don't understand at all how to be in the procedural world. So, what does the market want? Can I do what the market wants? Do I have the skills? How do I lean into the roles? There's always going to be the role of the grief-stricken whatever, right? The grief-stricken sister, the grief-stricken young mom, the grief, um, so the market wants drama sometimes. So, lean into that. Brands it's an absolutely useless word to me. And I think about branding a lot because I teach a business class for actors at UCLA and Pace and other universities, and those kids can easily hire a brand consultant for $3,000 an hour to be told that they're too short, or it's just some ridiculous things like they're too short to be a leading man, or they're too this or they're too that, and do this and do that. And I find it just really, it makes me absolutely crazy. The first question is, what is casting right now? What shows are casting right now? What is films and shows and whatever? What does the market want? What do you do really well? And then demonstrate that. So if you're really great at like medical technical jargon and you can be a really convincing EMT, then I don't see you're never going to stop working because there are just tons of roles like that, right? On every show, even a comedy, is going to have a doctor, dentist, nurse, EMT, police officer, detective, FBI agent, intelligence, government official, librarian. Like, what does the market want? What can you do well? And don't really worry too much about your brand. Like, if you start booking consistently a certain kind of role, then it's like, ta-da, that's my brand. Good for me. I'm going to be the go-to doctor. I'm going to be the go-to whatever. So that's the way I would couch it, that your materials, including your headshot is an opportunity to act. And a lot of people get told this, like, well, your headshot is just you on your best day. Well, okay, that's great if it's your picture in a program, or, I don't know, in a pamphlet or something, but that doesn't really help me if I'm casting a role and I'm looking through 25 pages of submissions. And a submission is going to be smaller than this little, if you see these little Zoom boxes, your submission picture to me is smaller than that. So, your picture has to scream the role at me. Like I'm searching these pictures, not just looking for a great picture of Victoria on her best day. I'm looking for my character. I'm looking for the person I'm casting, right? So your picture has to communicate to me the vibe of it. I have to see it. I have to see the character in you, right? So that's what I would focus on before anything else is, do my materials meet the market?
I got a bunch of questions, but I'm just gonna ask this one, maybe two. If I submit an audition and I'm pretty confident and I don't hear back from them, what's the factor? Is it they didn't like me? What in your experience, what's the factor when you see a great audition but you don't give them a call back? That's not them. It's what's the factor on
Okay,
us not.
so that question is not answerable. What's the factor when you are looking through Tinder, and who you click on and who you don't? What's the factor? I
I'm
mean,
gonna
so the factor can be, um, so let's say I request, like, so I go through 5,000 submissions, right? I can't have 5,000 self-tapes because I will go crazy, right? So I narrow it down, narrow it down. Let's say I'm going to request 50 tapes, right? So I start going through those tapes, and as I'm going through them, I'm making judgments. Do I feel this moment? Oh, I'm not quite feeling it, but there's something there. Like, I'm making all kinds of judgments the way that you make on a first date or a second date or a third date. It's completely subjective, and it's based on me, right? So then I narrow things down, I think about it, and I go through it again. So maybe I narrow down the 50. I go through it the first time and I just click the people who I absolutely love, like nailed it, nailed it, nailed it. I still might have 25 tapes. I can't send 25 tapes to my producers. My job is to send them, five, six, seven, maybe 10 tapes, right? So I have to just keep filtering, and I have to be like, I don't know. Who knows why, right? But, that first pass is when I'm getting rid of people who are like, it's not how I saw the role. They're not prepared. They didn't get it. They didn't get the joke. They didn't get the tone. They didn't do their work. They weren't prepared. You get rid of all the people who are just like, did not give the work. And the rest of it is just from my gut, from my just really kind of thinking about it. So then I send whatever, let's say at the most, I would send 10 choices to my director and my writer. And then maybe somebody else is going to look at it too. Now, who knows who they're gonna like, right? Now you have more people involved in making the decision. And so then maybe they're like, "Oh, I like her because of this. Oh, wait, I like her too, but she reminds me of my girlfriend. I don't want to be working with somebody who looks like my girlfriend." What are you supposed to do with that? What could you, Karen, as an actor, possibly do about that? Nothing, right? So then it's like, okay, let's have a callback with our favorite five. Oh no, no, I don't want to have five. This is too long. Let's just have three. Okay, fine. Let's just have three. So now we're going to call back three people for this role. So we call them back on Zoom and you read, and then, I'm recording you, and maybe they're giving you some direction. Maybe they're not. Maybe you have a good day. Maybe you don't. Whatever. Maybe you tell a funny story. Maybe you don't. Whatever. And then they go back and think about it and say, okay, hire Karen, or no, go ahead and hire Emma. I mean, there is nothing you can do about it. And then sometimes their favorite person, um, the network for some reason says, "Oh, we don't like them." Who was your second favorite person? What are you gonna do? So what we try to do is take that person we really loved, but they wouldn't let us cast, and recycle them and just like put them in some other role. If we can. If there's a role. If we're not at the very end of the season and there aren't any more roles. So, do you see how when I explained to you the process as an actor, there is nothing you can do about it?
But that's a perfect explanation. Thank you. You said exactly what I needed to hear.
Yeah, and you know what? If you ever become a director, like you do a short film or something, and you go through this process, you're going to be like, "Oh my God, I get it now. I absolutely get it." So all you can just keep doing is doing your best work, and just know that the next time I see a Karen Sanchez submitted to me, whether I remember what it was or not, I'm going to have a good feeling about your work, right? I'm going to be like, "Oh, let's click. Let's try her. Let's try her." And you just have to keep getting that click, that try her.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Hi, Lisa.
Hey.
I loved what you said about just even it's the differences between convincing acting and not convincing, and just even doing everything you can to ideally then get into that narrowed like 10 or whatever you were saying. And there's so many factors. I'm curious what your relationship is with managers versus agents, and if there's a difference at all, and how that factors in, if at all.
Yeah, so tell me the nugget of where this question is coming from.
I'm debating if I would have one or the other myself. And so I know often, agents are, building relationships with casting directors and things. I don't know to what extent managers are also doing the same, or if that plays
Yeah.
into your.
So again, this is a question that has no answer, because
Okay.
I know for me as a casting director, it really doesn't make any difference. They're the same. They both submit. They both pitch their clients. Legally, you're only supposed to actually send the offer to the agent, but when you're working at a super high level, the manager is going to be like, just send me the offer. I mean, it's like there's really not that much difference. It just kind of depends. I've got great friends who are managers and great friends that are agents, and they both submit their clients and they both pitch their clients. So it just kind of depends. It just depends on which agency we're talking about. I'm not sure which one you're talking about or which manager you're talking about. I have a coaching client, somebody that I coach as an actor. And this kid is like nonstop working, but he attributes it to his manager getting him a lot of auditions, which I'm not sure about that. And on the other hand, there are a lot of people who don't even have managers who are working, and they just have an agent. So,
Yeah, I actually have neither at this time. So
oh, okay. Well,
I've been exploring what that could look like either direction. So
look, you just want to get somebody to start submitting you, because right now you can't. You can't submit to any of the real jobs, right? So whoever will represent you first, go with them. And that doesn't end your journey. I like I said, I teach at UCLA and at Chapman and at Pace, and they have there are showcases coming up soon, which means that they're going to be doing a performance, sometimes live, sometimes via tape, for like every agent and manager in the industry. And it's very stressful for them because they're like, this is my chance. This is my chance to get representation. And some of them get representation from it, and some of them don't. And, I really just try to say, like, it's not a big deal. If you don't, it doesn't matter. And if you do, it doesn't matter, because if you do, that's not the end. Because you want to have an agent representing you for theatrical, for acting, for TV and film, but you also want a commercial agent, and you want a voiceover agent, and you might have a video game agent, right? And then you might have a manager. So you're like, your journey never ends for representation, because you want as many people on your team as possible, I think.
Beautiful. Absolutely.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Emma, great questions.
Yeah.
No, all of this is so helpful. I thought
Really? Oh, good.
yes. I thought what you said about the headshots was super interesting, and it makes sense when you're going through. So kind of on that way, I have different headshots that are just kind of different expressions, maybe different moods. Do you suggest like when you're submitting and you can kind of pick which headshot you want as your primary one, to change that per role, like which one kind of matches the character?
What do you think?
Probably.
What would make sense? If you were me, what would
Yeah.
make sense?
You want to look and from a first glance kind of see.
Yeah, otherwise, how else would I know what you can do?
No, that's so true. And I think from your perspective, I never thought about that, but now it makes a lot of sense when you're first looking through the thousands of submissions. So
Yeah, I mean, your picture is acting. Your picture is an opportunity to show me how you act. There's just no doubt about it. And I don't mean just being like smiling, not smiling, but there's an essence, there's a quality, there's a look in your eye that is important, right? That gives me a vibe. And I have to see that. Otherwise, how do I know that you're even, it's important. Yeah.
So good.
totally.
So my question actually is, because this has happened to me. I have a very small boutique agent in Chicago. I'm now looking for ones here. Most of the work I've gotten has just been on my own. I go daily into the network, into casting networks, and I submit myself constantly.
Right.
But what I'm finding now is I have certain casting directors who I'm noticing if I submit to them, they will often give me the audition. Is that coincidence, or is that because they have seen my work and they've gone, maybe I don't know, maybe it's just coincidence, but I've had a couple where, like my job today, I've auditioned for this, I've submitted for this role, this casting director multiple times. She's had me audition. Today she had me booked.
Yeah. What do you mean coincidence?
Well, I just mean, do the casting agents see that, wow, okay, there is some talent here? So when they see you submit again and they go, we know her range because we've seen, the real, yes, we want to put her through, because they do start to know who you are.
Of course. What would be the opposite? What I don't understand what the opposite would be, as opposed to what?
Yeah, I don't know. Good question.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So if you keep getting called in by the same cat, and this happens so much, I mean, that's why, on Criminal Minds, an actor on average auditioned 13 times before they booked. It's that we know that you can do this. We know it's like you've gotten really close. Like
Yeah.
either you've been a producer choice, maybe you did or you didn't know that the producer really liked you. Or not, but it means that we know that you can do this. And each episode is directed by a different director, right? And a different writer. Each episode is written by a different writer, directed by a different writer. So they don't know you the way that we do. And so we keep presenting you like, see, isn't she great? Or, we want to look good. We're not going to give them shitty people to look at, right? We only want to give them great people. So if you get called in by the same casting director, it's because you've proven to them that you're great, and they want to keep you in the mix. They want to show you off to the people that they're working for.
Yeah. I'm going to jump in there because everybody knows Rob. And Lisa, I don't know if I shared this with you, but we were in this magazine and he was on the Aspire. And his first paragraph in the article, he was speaking about you. And
Oh,
I think the question, I'll send it to you. I think the question had to do how he got his break or how he began getting these roles. And he said that he had auditioned for Lisa Zambetti 4 times, I think it was, for Criminal Minds, but he finally booked it, that sheriff role, on the fifth time. And so that was 5 times. And what's really interesting too was I think it was like it's a sheriff role, and he's playing the sheriff and mayor of Kingstown, and he's a sheriff in Yellowstone. So going back to what you were saying earlier on that, but
Right. You know what's so funny though for him? It's like I think at first, and you kind of learn, like that you love this actor, that they're great for the show. But I think the first time I brought him in was for a doctor. I don't know, I'd have to go back and look, but it was probably in my mind, I'm thinking I brought him in as a doctor, and then I brought him in as a businessman, and
ooh,
then as a boy, something, so you're kind of trying people in different things until he finally booked. And
yeah.
then, there's that confidence there, and then he's going to have that flip on his reel, which maybe somebody else saw when they were looking at his materials, and so that like establishes confidence in with another casting director in another show that, oh, okay, yeah, he's played this before. So I'm kind of the opposite. Like if I see an actor who's already played a detective on their reel, I'm like, well, I don't want to copy that show. I'm not going to make him I'm weird like that. Like I want to be discovering fresh people to do things, not just reusing the same person over and over again who always plays the surgeon or whatever. But anyway, other people don't think like me. So sometimes it's proof of talent when they can see that. But I love that he remembers me for that. I think that's so
I'll send you
wonderful.
the article. It's really nice. He opens up with it for sure.
I was curious from a casting perspective. Like I had one for a Broadway off Broadway tour, and I auditioned the same character, and then they were still looking, and I resubmitted, and she asked me to audition again, which was very confusing to me. But I just thought, well, all right, I'll do it again. So I was just curious from
Yeah,
that
yeah.
perspective.
I mean, it can be very overwhelming. I don't know. I've seen this a couple times. Like, we'll put out this character and we think we've cast it, and then the person falls out, so we have to do it all over again. And then it's like sometimes you forget who you've seen, or like if you've been submitted, like if you submit yourself to a lot of different roles on the same show, sometimes we're like we forget who we've seen, you know? So anyway.
I actually have a question about slates.
Uh-huh.
Um, I was wondering, so I know that there's different variations that people can do with slates, but I've heard that I think they call it a button at the end of a slate, like kind of a personality thing. Do you yourself as a casting director, do you appreciate those, or are you just kind of like, not so much? Or what is your thoughts on having like a little button at the end, like kind of a little
Right. So
piece?
again, this is not an answerable question because it so depends on whatever. So for example, the film that I was casting this year that shot in Nashville, it was about cancer. And so a couple of people in their slate for the role that kind of is in your age range mentioned like, hi, my name is Lisa, I'm 5'2", I'm based in blah blah. Which is that's all we need from your slate. We just need to see you as a normal person, right? Uh
Right.
based in LA, whatever. A couple people were like, I just want you to know I love the script, and my mom died of cancer 2 years ago. Like that's a really cool thing for us to know about you, as long as it's true, right? I mean,
Right.
or, maybe it's a different role. And it's like, I just want you to know that I was a pre-professional ice skater. So I've got really great ice skating skills and I can do a triple axel, like something that is pertinent to the project can be good, or it can be super cheesy. It's like, okay, it just kind of depends. You have to use your judgment. Some slates don't require anything. Some slates are like, oh, and by the way, I worked with the director on this. Hey, Rob, or whatever. Like it has to be very kind of specific. But as far as using it just as a gimmick, just to stand out, like, I don't know. The producer may or may not even see that. I may not include your slate when I send it to them. So I don't know. So it's you just got to use your best judgment, and if you feel called to add something extra, then listen to that voice. But if it's just like mainly we just want to know how you pronounce your name, where you're based or where you say you're based, if you can work as a local hire, and your height. We don't need your age ever, ever, ever. We don't need your weight. We don't need, any other stuff about you. Um, just the basics. But I definitely
Yeah.
have seen people who offer a little bit extra information or do something really cute, like if they can speak a different language, they might start their slate in Spanish, if it's appropriate, and then break into English, or it just depends on. But it's always nice to know that you read the script or you're a fan of the show or whatever, just something to make you a human.
Because I like the human connection too, and I think sometimes like I just didn't realize about the button thing until recently, and I'm like, oh, I like that because I think it will genuinely show kind of like the connection between me as an artist, but as a human loving what's there in the project. So yeah, I just wanted to hear your
Yeah.
thoughts. So thank you
Yeah,
for
I
doing
just
that.
wouldn't say something like, I just love acting and I've been acting since
Right.
I was a little girl. Like, yeah, who hasn't? Everybody has.
Right. Yeah,
So I wouldn't
for
be
sure.
like just to have a button just to be generic. I would be
Right.
that's appropriate.
For sure.
Like the casting act, like actors access, sorry, and backstage. Is there one that you would recommend over another, like when you're casting, or do you solely just go straight through the agencies?
Well, it just depends on where, the location where I'm casting. I think you should be on as many as you think that are valuable. I mean, right now, definitely Actors Access and Casting Networks, very important platforms, especially casting networks for commercials and stuff. I'm not really sure for your region. I know that other people really rely on Playbill, like if you were in the New York area, because there's a lot of plays. Some people rely on Backstage. You have to, and you can turn them on and turn them off and see what's working for you. See, but you want to get to that. What I was saying is the submission rates. You want to get to where there's enough there that you can submit to so that you can start getting higher ratios of self-tape requests. So funny. If you follow, you can go follow me on Instagram and you can see this client because when he booked Law and Order that I coached him on, he posted a little thank you to me for coaching. And then he also just, I coached him and he just booked Chicago PD. And he also booked a role in a feature that I coached him on. So he's like on a real high and all that stuff. But the reason why he's booking so much is because he auditions like like a freak. I mean, I coach him. There are some weeks where I'm coaching him every day on something. Sometimes I'm coaching him on 3 auditions a day, right? So his submission rate and his self-tape rate is incredibly high because he's got like 8 agents. Okay. He has an agent in LA, in New York, in Atlanta, in Las Vegas, in Seattle, in Hawaii, in Chicago. He's got all of those regions covered and then some, and he may even have one in Nashville. I don't know. So he is, and because he has set up his life and he's young, he's like in his, I don't know, he must be his mid-20s. He has, no mortgage, no kids, not married. He is just like, I will go anywhere for a job. So he can be a local hire. He's willing to be a local hire in any market, right? And it makes him incredibly competitive as opposed to, being an LA actor who will work, in another market if, they're paying your travel and stuff like that. But he's like, his point of view is like, I just want to work as much as possible, get on all of these casting directors' radars as much as possible. And then eventually, I won't have to work this way. And he weighs the cost analysis benefit, right? If he's up for something that's not really paying that much, then, if he's going to have to house himself or fly himself there or drive, 8 hours to get somewhere, he may or may not he may not be submitted for it. But if it's something like a major series, then for him, it's worth it, right? So,
Um, what are the pluses of having a manager? I have 2 agents, but I'm just wondering what's the pluses of having a manager?
well, not every manager is worth having. you know? I mean, it just depends on on your relationship with them. So, theoretically, a manager is somebody who's trying to craft your whole career and is looking at your whole career objectively. I mean, sometimes I don't really know if that's really what they do because I mean, I don't really know. I mean, that's a nice thing to say, but how does that really manifest itself? There's only a few things they can do. They can submit you for the job that I post, and they can pick up the phone and call me and pitch you to me. Other than that, what else can they do? And that's what an agent does, right? So theoretically, a manager is kind of looking at your whole, is much more hands-on with your career. But, I don't know, are they recommending that you get a new headshot? Are they, taking you out to lunch with a producer? Are they getting, like I'm not, it just depends on what they're actually doing on the daily to help you, other than taking a percentage, right?
Right.
So you have to sort of ask them that, like, what is this relationship going to be like? What do you do that my agent isn't going to do? And maybe they're a hustler. Maybe they're like, yeah, we're going to get you into this class and we're going to get you, into this mark. Maybe they do have a plan for you. But you just have to ask them, how do they like to work? What's the benefit of being with a manager? Because your agent can submit you for the exact same projects, right? I know in some markets, it's a little tricky in some markets because if you're not a SAG franchised agent or an association of talent managers manager, you actually can't submit to breakdown anyway. They don't let you. They don't let you in. So, you kind of have to know what are they going to do for you?
Come
Yeah,
in there too, Lisa. I'm going to ask you a question on top of it. I'm going back to my GH days when I was on General Hospital. I was a young actress. One of the biggest mistakes that I made, I don't know if it's the same today. I'm guessing it probably is, but there was a difference between a personal manager and a business manager.
mm,
I had the whole personal manager in mind. The biggest mistake I ever made was not having someone help me with my finances. I thought I knew everything.
mm,
And so I think, I don't know, I think it's weighing it out too of where you are because you have to be at a certain place for somebody really to have something to market too when you're looking for a manager. I know when I was out there just auditioning between New York and California, I really didn't need a manager because there was nothing to manage
yeah.
until I became, on those shows and did all of that stuff. So is it the same way today with that between
Well,
a
look,
personal and
a business manager is something completely different. A business manager is just like an accountant and
right?
about money and maybe helping you monetize certain things and the business manager is a totally different thing than a talent manager. Legally, it's a totally different thing, right? And, legally, your talent manager isn't allowed to touch your money, isn't allowed to do your contract, isn't allowed to do a lot of things, right? But, but your lawyer, your entertainment lawyer can. So, it's just look, if you're getting to a level of your career, you're gonna know when you need all those people.
Right.
But it just depends, like I said, it just depends on who the manager is. And, I was doing a deal with a huge A-list star, and it was the manager that reached out to me, and it was the manager who did the deal. And it was the manager who said, okay, they'll be in your movie for this amount of money for 3 days, $500,000. It's like, so, which legally you're supposed to go through the agent. Anyway, it's confusing.
Yeah.
But, look, it is what it is. The easiest way to know what to do is look at their client list. Do they have clients that are working? Who do they represent? Are their clients booking things? Are their clients in the kind of shows and television and series and networks and stuff that you want to be on? Then that's going to
Yeah.
answer a really big question for you.
Totally agree. And what level are these actors at? Because I know when I had my eyes on that, I wasn't ready for that. I had to get to a certain place. So I think all of those elements are so important. That was a great answer. Thank you.
Good, good.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Joey and then Emma. Do you need a break at all, Lisa? Is this
No, no, no,
okay?
no. Oh, good.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so I've come back after many, many years. So back in the day, of course, you went to audition there in front of everybody. So now it's a whole new world. You have the self tapes and all that kind of stuff. And I came in when you were talking about one of the things that you look for in that self tape is that person authentic in what they're doing? Do I believe that you are a messenger or delivery man or whatever? And that, I think that's really awesome. I think, sometimes I wonder do I have to like grab their attention? Do I have to be something I'm not? Or do I just kind of hone in on that? Along with that, were there maybe one or two other things that you look at, or besides the authenticity, are there any other things that you kind of look at generally when you see that? And then kind of a B part of that question is, I've heard that a lot of times casting directors don't, they look at maybe 30 seconds or a minute or of a tape. Do you yourself, watch a whole clip, or how much of a clip do you withhold their attention, or does that depend on the actor? Thanks.
So, okay, so a couple things. So the first thing, I want to go back to your first question because there are some things that I do want to share with you. So, unlike any other casting director that you will meet or that Tina knows or whoever have a guest, I am probably the only casting director who ever did a research study on actors who book and looked at all the things they have in common. So, because I have worked on not just shows that I was the casting director on, but I've been an associate and an assistant on just so many of the biggest shows you've ever heard of. I have all those auditions. I was there for like lots and lots of auditions. Sometimes I was the reader or whatever. So I've just got terabytes of hard drives of auditions. And so I did a study and I looked at every single actor who had booked the role, be a co-star, guest star, series regular, whatever, whatever, whatever. And I just looked at their audition and I had a big database and I just watched their audition and I went, "Oh, they did this. Oh, they didn't do that. Oh, they did. Oh, wow." And I just made all these categories, right? So after watching, 300, 500, 800, 1,000 actors who booked, I looked at my database and it was very clear there are certain things that actors who book do. And that isn't interesting information, right? That's just like valuable to know that there are certain things people do. So the first thing that they do is they are off book, baby. They are off book. They do not have the page in their hand. They never look down. They are just from start to finish engaged in whatever the fiction is, right? Now, as a casting director, I can't require you to be off book. It's against the SAG-AFTRA rules. I can't do that. But I'm just telling you that your competition, when they book, they're usually off book, right? And they don't have the script in their hands. No matter what any other casting director is going to tell you, I'm going to tell you that the actors who book don't, okay? Because they can do so much else with their hands, right? There are all kinds of other really interesting business that they can be doing with their hands in the scene, right? And if you have your script in your hand, you can't do that. The second thing is that actors who book dress to suggest the role. They are super strategic about what they wear for their audition. So, like if you, Joy, you would be perfect, like a grandma, right? So if you're playing a
Right.
grandma, you might want to wear like a flowery t-shirt or a, little cardigan sweater with your hair just the way it is, right? You would not want to wear a suit, right? You would
Right.
want to wear something that was not leaning into the role, right? Now, if you were going to be a nurse or, you'd make a great, charge nurse or something, you would want to wear a scrubs top or something that kind of looked a little, hospital-y to make it
Mhm.
easy for me to see you, not really me, but to make my director and my writer just like, "Oh yeah, that Booker, she's it." They're
Wow.
not looking to make you to direct you into the role. There is no time for
Mhm.
that. What
Right.
they see is what they need to get on set, right? Because they are not going to see you again until it's time for you to shoot. right? So you have to sell your product with confidence that the goods you have is what they're buying, right? So, and if you're going to play a lawyer, you better wear a suit that fits you. That's not your, your roommate's suit that doesn't fit you. If you're going to be a bartender, you're going to want to, decide, well, what kind of bar is this? Is it a country western bar? Is it a, really foofy high Upper East Side bar, right? If you're a mechanic, if you're a this, if you're whatever it is, what would your character be wearing? And then try to sort of approximate it, which doesn't mean wear a costume at all. I don't mean that at all. You shouldn't buy a cop uniform or anything like that, but you have to be smart because you can control that. Yeah. And then the third thing I'll say is having activity using a prop in your scene, huge,
Huge.
hugely, huge
Wow.
opportunity for you to display character, right? A character's state of mind is reflected in how they use their environment, right? So if I'm like, furiously texting somebody, you get my state of mind, right? The way that I'm
Yeah.
text, right? But if I don't have a phone in my hand, or the way that I sip my coffee, or the way that if I'm having an argument with my husband and I'm folding the towels a certain way, like, activity implies state of mind. So if you can use a prop in a really non-distracting way, like the prop doesn't even have to make it into the shot, but like I'm doing something. Most characters are doing things either before the scene starts or after it ends or in the middle of the scene. Even just, starting to leave, your character's leaving and they throw their backpack on their shoulder before they leave. Even if the scene doesn't say she puts her backpack on, it doesn't matter. You can put your backpack on in a way that's like very cheeky or very mad or very tired. Activity implies state of mind. So actors who know that look for opportunities to incorporate that into their acting. So
I
that was
am
your first.
so glad you brought that up because there's a lot of mixed opinions about using a prop. Personally, I didn't know the statistics on that, but I encourage it here all the time. Activity, all of it, all the time. I use them in my audition. So now we know that this is a statistic that she's sharing with us. So we went over this in depth again today in class. Thank you for that answer. It backs up what I've been saying, and I didn't even know the statistics on it.
Yeah, and I'm just, one person, and these aren't all just my projects, but now, and that was a while ago that I did that study, but I follow this Instagram account called Audrey Helps Actors. I don't know if you're aware of it, but you should definitely be following it. And she is often posting auditions that actors send her. They send her the audition that booked the role, and they'll have their audition, and then they'll also sometimes have the actual the aired scene after it airs. And if you go and look at those, it reinforces everything from my study. It's constantly reinforcing. And now with the home self-tape, actors are even, doing their self-tapes in on locations, not just in front of
Yeah.
a backdrop, right? I was just looking at her site and there was this guy who had an audition and it was set in a library. He went to the frickin' library, and he had all the books around him and he was able to be like, shh, he was able to like act like he was in a library because he was in a library. So, and it worked for him. I'm not saying that you should always do that, but actors are really getting creative on
Yep.
what they're doing, right? And that's kind of the beautiful thing about self-tapes. As
Yeah,
much as complain, it gives you an opportunity to be really creative. But if you go
wonderful.
to Audrey Helps Actors and you look at her Instagram page, she has lots and lots of actors who have sent her their audition that booked the role. And
Wonderful.
that's what you need. You need to see that, right? Because and the thing
Mhm.
about casting directors and directors, when they sort of are when they tell their stories about how they cast something, sometimes they're not reliable narrators. Sometimes they're not quite remembering how it all went down because I worked with a very big producer who did who whatever showrunner of a show, and I was listening to her talk about casting, and she was kind of scoffing about, yeah, don't bother wearing a doctor's jacket if you're auditioning for a doctor. That's not necessary. It kind of stuck with me, and I went back to my database and I looked at the roles we actually cast. What do you think I found? They did not remember their own casting. They did not
Oh,
remember
wow.
what they did. That the
Wow.
actors they chose
Yeah.
were absolutely wearing white lab coats and scrubs and this and
Yeah.
that. So, I mean, they don't think about things like I do. Like I'm very obsessed with that kind of thing. So I keep track of that, and I have a very low bullshit, as you can tell, bullshit meter, because it's really important. It's really important that you get really good advice that's based on
Yes.
evidence and not anecdotes.
Yeah. And it
Mhm.
creates space. And she's not saying use the prop as a distraction. Don't let it be a distraction, but it enhances. And you've got to create your space, bring them into the experience. Does that
Yeah,
work for you, Lisa? Yeah. Okay. Thank
absolutely.
you so much. That was so good because that's what I teach.
Absolutely. And what about the time? Do you watch the whole clip? Do
Oh,
you just
all right. So this is a really hard one to answer as well. So like let's say, like I said, I've got a scene. Let's say so recently I had a scene about a substitute teacher. And in the scene, the substitute has got a couple lines in the beginning of the scene and then kind of doesn't say anything for a while, is just kind of reacting, and then has a few lines at the end of the scene. So as I watched it the first time, and I'm like, for like 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 people, yeah, I'm watching the whole thing. And then I'm like, okay, I get what I need to see to know who I want to kind of put in the yes pile, right? So that might mean I might watch the first couple lines and then skip to the end. It just depends. It's like anything else, it just depends. And then I mean I definitely watch all of the tapes. And then I go back again, and now I've got, 25 tapes. Well, I can't send 25 people to my producer. That's my job, is to hone it down to the top 5, 6, 7, whatever. So now I watch it again, and then so it's like I'm watching, I'm clicking through, I'm thinking about it, I'm watching it again, and then so it's not really a straightforward answer. Do you watch the whole tape? Well, I don't need to watch
Mhm.
the whole tape. I
Yeah.
just need to watch enough to know that I like you.
Okay.
You don't care if I watch the whole thing as long as I like you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Thank you so much for that. And I'll tell you what, one of the things you said just now that really I'm honing in on is that you did a study. You studied it. You got that information, that data about actors and the ones that booked and what all they have in common. And so I take what you give me as really good information because you took the time to do that study.
Hey, Lisa, I'm actually really glad that before this question you got into the study that she was just mentioning there. Because one thing I've wanted to know a lot more on is the statistical side of, ultimately submitting. You want to have the best chances you possibly can.
Yeah.
And so a lot of these things, with props and outfit and that sort of thing, you've gotten at that point to the stage that the casting director is watching your video. And I find most of those things pretty intuitive, especially like the more that I work, you start learning those kinds of things.
Yeah.
The stage of things that I'd like to learn more on, and I'm a little in asking this question, this may be something that does fall into the unanswerable part, but that's also partly why it's the more befuddling stage to me. But it's
Yeah.
going to those cases where you do have, say, 5,000 people and you're getting it down to 50. So Carrie here actually, she asked me a little while back about opinions on backdrop color. This is just one example, but we talked a little bit, and it reminded me. So I had a friend on Instagram was doing this podcast with someone, and she mentioned a friend of hers who experimented with a red backdrop, and which is pretty counterintuitive, but anecdotally, he reported that he actually started getting more callbacks with that red backdrop than he did with the conventional blue, gray, green. Um, So where a lot of my interest is then is getting to that point. I feel like once the casting director is watching the video, those parameters, like, how I frame it, like my clothing, props, that sort of thing, those are within my control.
Yeah.
In that stage where it's a little bit out of control, are there any factors that leap out to you? Do you notice something like a bias towards a certain backdrop color or framing of a headshot? I was taught recently to zoom in on the headshot thumbnail a little bit to get closer on the eyes. Are there any blatant factors that may be a little bit less intuitive at that stage to get it to that point where you're in that 50 that get picked in those cases?
Yeah, there is no statistical information about backdrop color. And none. So it could be, I don't know. I don't know who the actor you're talking about, and it would be really interesting for me. I'm kind of grokking out a little bit, like, oh, I'd love to watch all those tapes and see what I think. But it could be that it's a coincidence that
Yeah,
he
it's
just
just nature
happened
of the
to be
anecdote.
right for the role, and maybe his acting skills are great, and his backdrop happened to be red. The thing is that you're going to hear a lot of actors who have this really amazing setup, right? But then they go out of town on vacation and they get an audition. They don't have their setup. So they got to shoot in front of a freaking bathroom wall and they book it, right? So I've booked plenty of actors who were, so apologetic, like I was with my family at Disneyland and they didn't have the ideal setup. They didn't have, all this great stuff and they booked and then some people book in their setup. So I don't know. And I don't know if that, I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and say that my gut is like it's not about the background. It can't possibly be about the background because I've seen the most beautifully lit, professionally shot tapes where somebody's gone to a studio, like a self-tape studio, and have a lavalier mic on and have like, box lights and a beautiful background, and they suck. So it's not going to be your background and your lighting that is going to get you the job. Now, sound, like I have to be able to hear you, that's really important. But I think, sure. I think that, look at your backdrop and like, does this backdrop flatter me? Does it set off my eyes? Is it a good contrast with my skin tone? Does it make my hair look good or whatever, Does it work with the wardrobe I'm using? Those are things that are kind of cool to think about, and it probably will make you feel really good about your performance. But I see no statistical data that leads me to believe that a red background is of any advantage. He may have just gotten on a really good run. That does tend to happen where people tend to book in clusters once they get on a run. And then they get super superstitious about what did I do? I got to do the same thing. I got to kiss the ring. I got to cross myself 5 times. I got to do, got to spin around, and then it stops working. And it's kind of like being an athlete,
Hmm.
same thing. All you baseball fans out there, Um, so I don't know what to tell you. I guess what I want to tell you is that there's no magic thing. Like, sure, try a red background, see what happens. Try a different jacket. Some people have lucky shirts. Some people have lucky shoes. Some people have lucky haircuts. Some people have, do whatever you want to do to make yourself feel better. But there is just absolutely no data at all.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why everybody has blue backgrounds is like for the longest time in all of our offices, when we had offices, we were told to have a blue curtain. For whatever reason, we were all told to have a blue curtain when we were shooting, our auditions in our offices, right? And then I was like in this office and I didn't have blue, so I had like a gray curtain and I started using that and it was like it didn't matter. Like the studio didn't go, you have to change that like they didn't give a shit. So, I would just be like, do what feels right. There's no magic background. There's no wrong background. There's no right background. There's just your acting. Can I see it? Can I hear it? And the proof
Awesome.
is plenty of actors are getting cast like on a cruise with their family, in a hotel room, and you know, just do the good work. That's really what we're looking for. And, try to be as professional as you can. I mean, it's good to have, don't do your self-tape in front of your washing machine, which I've seen people do before. That's not helpful. But, do your best.
Yeah, no, this is so helpful. I think in terms of self-taping, sometimes like you can feel a little constrained to like your background, the frame. Like, is taking that risk, like if it's someone on a farm and like going outside and putting on the regional accent, but do it well. Like, does that kind of just putting yourself truly as that character so they can see you as much as possible as that person, like worth it? Like that is encouraged, I
I don't
guess.
know. Try it. See what happens. I have no idea. I have no idea. I mean, all I know is that I have recently seen a ton of people taking risks that make sense,
Yeah.
that really set the world and give you something to do. I wouldn't do anything that was really distracting, but something that's really grounded, like, you're playing a farm girl who's, you know, just got done mucking a stall. And so, you've got your rake and you're
Yeah.
involved in the scene, but it feels real, that's if that helps your acting, then yes, do it. But
No.
if it doesn't, if it's just a crutch and it's just a gimmick, it's
Yeah.
not gonna.
No.
Yeah, that's a great
But
answer.
you may as well be creative at least for one of the takes. Why not? Because as a casting director, I have the ability to not include a take.
That's interesting. So like yeah, maybe one you kind of go for it in like a different way and then one
Yeah,
a little more. Yeah.
there's no downside.
Awesome. And then I had one more question in terms of like different markets. Like a lot of shows and movies that I think I'm interested in or would be a fit for are like shot in Canada and like other places. Um so you're saying like if you're like I want to be more in that market, like look for representation in that market or wherever you want to be. That's just a really interesting perspective that I
But
hadn't.
you're not going to be able to do it in Canada unless you have a visa. Because a lot of things that shoot in Canada, they have an incentive. They get money back from the government if they use a certain amount of Canadian actors. So they
Oh,
and
okay.
and so if it's a situation where they can job in, it depends on the production company and the network, where they can open up the search and job in American actors, then sure. Or like when I worked on a show called Covert Affairs, it's
Mhm.
an American network, an American production company, but it shot in Toronto. So we used a lot of Canadian actors and we only had the budget to cast two American actors. So we were always looking for like really high-end, American actors to be those roles because they paid the most and it costs the most money to send those actors there.
Yeah, I guess you do notice a lot of Canadian actors in Canadian films or TV shows. That's probably why.
And we have all these dialects and Southern accents. There's so many of them. Would you prefer, if there's only a 48 time turnaround for the audition, would you prefer that the actor maybe get a dialect coach, go all in, try to work on this accent and do it with an accent, or would you prefer that they did not do it with an accent first time around? What is the preference on something like that if they're unsure that they can pull it off authentically?
Well, I mean, look, I think everybody should be able to do a Southern accent. It's just not that hard, or like, and there are differentiations between a Texas accent, where you're going to do a pin pan substitution, and a true Tennessee accent, where you're going to add a whole bunch of vowels to pan, right? So, I think it's not that hard to have some sort of regionalism just to tap it a little bit. Um, I don't know. I wouldn't pay an audition coach, but if you're gonna go for a role, you better go for it. You better bring what the role needs. Now, I think actors overdo accents sometimes, right? If you're doing a Northeastern accent, I mean, a Staten Island accent sounds very different than a Long Island accent, than a
Yes.
Brooklyn, Queens, and Connecticut and Massachusetts accent. Those are all very, very distinct, and you need. I mean, I interviewed one time the dialect coach that coached Kate Winslet on Mare of Easton, which was a very specific Philadelphia accent that she had to learn.
Where I'm
Now,
from.
yeah, 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 yeah. So, nobody's expecting you to have that level of precision at first, but you got to get in the ballpark. You have to get into the world, right? So it's not that hard to do. You can go on YouTube for anything these days and at least get it in your ear so that, and you know this, Tina. I mean, regions, even people with like I'm from the Bay Area, the San Francisco Bay Area, and there are some people there who sound like they're from Georgia. I mean, they have a real rural way about their accent, So anyway, I guess what I'm saying is if you're going to audition for something, audition for it. Like
Here you
bring
go.
it, do the best you can, even if it can't be pinpoint accurate. You should at least be in the region. It's not that hard to have a regional Northeast vibe or a Southern vibe or, a rural vibe or like, a San Francisco kind of denuded of anything vibe, you should be able to tap into the energy. It is very important, I think.
But it changes nuances
The
than a
rhythm,
person.
there's a whole rhythm to it. There's a whole
Right.
vibe to it. There's a whole physicality to it. So, the good news is because of the SAG-AFTRA strike and their agreement, you will at least have 48 hours to turn around your tape, right? Before it was 24 hours, but you will at least have 48 hours. That is plenty of time to go on YouTube, watch a whole bunch of things, get it in your ear, or you should at least be training in a way that you can do that.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. So there's your answer for that.
Yeah, as far as headshots, um, like they used to, I lived in LA in the 80s, and they said, well, there's a West Coast look and there's an East Coast look. And then now, is that still the same? And then there's so many people that do headshots. It's like, well, so and so's coming in from LA, or so and so's coming in from Georgia, or you go to Georgia. How do you know you're getting the look when you're going to spend that kind of money to get new headshots and you want it to be right? That's one of my hangups right now because I've got to get new ones.
Right. So there's a couple things. I don't know what a LA headshot is as opposed to a New York headshot. That I'm not quite sure. I mean, there used to be, well, from my point of view, there isn't one. Like I said, you're meeting the market, you're meeting the role. So does your headshot look like the role? Does it have the same vibe as the role? There used to be sort of theatrical headshots that would be good for theater. Like if you were auditioning for the season of, Ashland, Oregon Shakespeare or Alabama Shakes or Milwaukee Rep, and you were going to be auditioning for the season, you don't know what role you're going to get, then you kind of have a generic headshot of yourself, but that's not really what we do now. It's very specific. I have to believe, Rick, that you could be a doctor or a lawyer or a rural, or a farmer or whatever. So as far as like West Coast, East Coast, like for me, that's not a thing. That's just not a factor.
Mhm.
Now, as far as, okay, there's a whole process to when you're going to go get your headshot. And we teach this at UCLA and we teach this at Pace and Chapman University. You need to find actors who have the headshot that you want. So you have to study the market. You have to study. If you are watching a TV show and you're like, I love this role, I should play this role. Like realistically, there's a co-star or a guest star. It's like, I would be great in that role. Look up the actor, look at their headshot. What kind of headshot do they have? Unless they're a big famous actor who this was an offer for them, they're going to have a headshot that kind of meets the market, right? So you want to start collecting the headshot looks that you like. That it's like, I want my headshot to look like this. And then you do your research. If it doesn't matter if somebody says, oh, here's this LA headshot photographer or whoever, there's a million of those people, right? So you want to look at their website, look at their roster, look at their work and go, "Oh, yes, that's the kind of headshot I want." Oh, yes, and you need to bring them examples. So we have a whole process we go through at UCLA where I have them like, look up what I just said, like give a lot of prototypes of the kinds of look they want. Like here's the young heroine look, here's the quirky secretary, here's the the sad best friend or whatever. And they have lots and lots of examples. And then we look at their wardrobe. What do they have? And then we think about when you're taking your picture, what are you thinking when you're taking a picture? Because taking a good photograph is not just about smiling. And maybe Carrie, because you do a lot of commercials, maybe you can speak to that. It's about thinking something. There's something behind your eyes. There's an attitude you have. There's something you're communicating in the picture when you're looking down the lens. You're not just smiling, it's acting. So what I would do if I were you, I would just find prototypes of the kind of photo that you'd want to have based on the market. Who is getting the jobs that you want? And what kind of materials do they have? So if you have if you have an IMDb, if you look them up, people up on IMDb, you can, maybe look on Actors Access or whatever and find the prototypes. So you don't have to buy a whole package of a photographer's time. You can say, look, I just need two looks. I need a professional look and then I need a dad look. Will you give me a break on your package? I just need you for an hour. Can you just shoot me for an hour? Or, instead of having a whole photo shoot, because, actors get, photos every other year, maybe just so that they can update because they're studying the market. And it's like, oh, there's a lot of, like a comic, a picture, like a commercial headshot is going to be different than a drama headshot, right? The headshot that you have for your CSI, Law and Order, P, Chicago PD is going to be different than what you're submitting for Chick-fil-A or Pepsi or whatever, those are going to be different looks. Or for comedy, right? If you're going to be submitted for a lot of, multicam, single cam, goofy comedies, Abbott Elementary or whatever, that's a different picture, different background, different, more vibrant colors, more kind of a fun vibe, more goofiness then that's going to be a totally different dad. Goofy dad is going to be different than Heart of America dad, So you just have to study, you have to do your homework, you have to, look at lots and lots. All of these photographers have websites.
Yeah.
Get all of their work and see, do I recognize anybody who they've shot,
That's really, really like the best answer.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. I think I know what you're talking about, Rick. You did you say 1980s?
Yeah.
What it was, we were doing headshots in black and white then, and there was a little thing. I'm glad they did away with it,
Yeah.
as Lisa said, but it was 3/4 inch, 3/4 body, not 3/4 inch. That's how we filmed. Sorry. No, but the body was 3/4. And in New York, it was just the headshot here. So it was here to here headshot. And out in LA, it was more of a body. I know this because of Marvin Page. I went through a whole thing back in the day, but thank God they did do away with that because this is making more sense, right? But that's what that was. So yeah, let that all go. Do what Lisa's saying here for sure.
Okay, going back to the headshots, so much information. Thank you. Wardrobe, if for some reason, like if I get a ton of doctor auditions, is it overkill when I do my headshots to throw in one with a lab coat or even a scrub top?
I kind of think it's okay to do. Some people would say, oh, it's too on the nose, but I know a lot of actors where that works,
Yeah.
It just depends on who the casting director is and who the producer, I don't know. It just kind of depends. I mean, you can certainly have something that this sort of feels like you'd be a doctor, even if you're not in your
Yeah.
script. Something that seems really confident, very in your body, wearing something kind of professional. But I don't have a problem with people wearing. You don't want to wear a scrubs top that looks like you just cracked it out of the package,
Yeah.
It needs
Yeah.
to fit you. It needs to be really worn in. It needs to be, feel very natural. But you can also get that kind of, you might be able to get that same kind of vibe with like a t-shirt and a matching cardigan.
Yeah.
It's just kind of the vibe. But a
Gotcha.
doctor is going to be much more, a doctor has status, right? Doctor is different than a nurse. So if you want to be considered a doctor, then, having that blazer, that very structured top, arms crossed, or something really strong to imply
Yeah.
to medical school, right?
Yeah, I'm only thinking that because when you said at a first glance with that thumbnail, if that catches an eye, I was thinking, I've never thought of that before until you were saying what you did earlier about the first glance and just
I
didn't
mean,
know if
I'd
that
try
might,
it. There's nothing, it's not going to cost you any more to
yeah,
throw that lab coat and have like 5 or 6 shots of you in that
that's
and
what
just
I'm
see
thinking.
if your agent starts using it and it gets you more, self-tape requests, then you kind of have your answer, right?
Yeah. Okay. Very, very helpful. Thank you.
Oh,
Sure.
great.
Yes, I was wondering because we're talking headshots, self-tapes, and we haven't talked any about demo reels. So I would just love to hear any thoughts on that regard of I don't know if you've done research on that as well, or if how long you even watch those, or if that I'd just love to hear your thoughts. Any direction you want to go with that.
Sure, okay. Yeah, so for my purposes, if I'm going to look at somebody's demo, it's not just because I want to watch your demo. I mean, it's going to be because I'm looking for something. So if I'm considering you for the role of a lawyer or a doctor, what is it, where is the proof in your material that makes me think, oh yeah, they have the gravitas, they have the strength, they have the emotion, they have, whatever it is I'm looking for. So anything on your reel that is not that, I'm not even paying attention to. You know what I mean? I'm just like click, click, click. That is where I'm like, click, 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 click. Where is it? Where is it? Or if you've got some people don't have reels, they've actually just got their clips. And it might be who I forget who said they were working with Taylor Sheridan, but like they might have, their Western clips or their clip from Yellowstone, their clip, an urban clip from Law and Order, their commercial, they might have it broken out. That can be really helpful because then I can just really kind of get to what I'm looking for. But yeah, I mean, you just want to, have good work. And if you haven't been in something, it's not the end of the world. A lot of people just post their really good self-tapes. If you've self-taped for something that you love, you think that you really killed this audition, and it's after the whatever you auditioned for has aired, let's say you didn't get it, right? But you love your audition, you look great, it all was working for you. It's great material. It shows off your skills. Once that episode airs and you're in the clear, right? It's in the public domain, so you're not violating any non-disclosure. You can put that on your reel as proof of your work, of as a demonstration of your work, right?
Oh, that's
Or
good to know. Wow.
yeah, lots and lots of people do that.
Wow.
So, or you've done it, or you make your own, or you make your own audition. You make your own perfect self-tape. It's like if you know that you want to be the mean ex-girlfriend vibe. I don't know. I'm just picking anything. You kind of look like you could be a really good mean ex-girlfriend. So, and you want to pick a really great scene from something really obscure but has great writing, and you want to do a little scene, why not? Do it.
Yeah. So even just tailoring multiple demo reels, even if you wanted, like, would you just like you tailor your resume for what the job you're applying for and
Exactly.
having
Exactly.
different versions of, if I know I'm submitting for what you just said, I'm finding the clips that most match that and only put that.
I would do that. Now, I don't know how that works. I mean, it's ex incredibly expensive to put stuff on Actors Access, so I get that, but it just kind of depends on what you're submitting for. So,
So I have a question. That brings me to a question. Just recently, we had an agency meeting at Treasure Coast, and our reels are now being cut down. They have to be 2 minutes. So there was a lot that had to be cut out of the demo, and then you select what you want. So if you have quite a bit of work, it's difficult. I mean, we did it together, obviously, but what I'm doing, and tell me if you would even look, is put the new demo there. It's there, 2 minutes, and then have different clips on the Actors Access. And hopefully, if you like something in the demo, you're not seeing it in the demo. Would you then go over and look at a clip if you're not seeing?
yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I
Okay.
don't know if you guys work on that, but so in that case, clips are probably more important than the demo. I mean, it's hard to say. It just depends on it just so depends on what you're auditioning for, and is there anything appropriate for me to see at all on your reel? But yeah, if you have a large body of work, it's tricky. But I would just get rid of anything that's old. Get rid of anything that looks old. A lot of people have stuff on their reel because they did an episode with a big star or something, so they're really kind of hesitant to get rid of it. But if it's so old that you don't even look the same anymore, but you're just kind of hanging on to it because you were in a scene with whoever, I don't know. I would get rid of that because you're paying for that.
Yeah, that's good. So just have your clips on there as well, if it's something that you're proud of, or what Lisa was saying as far as a really great audition and already aired. That I didn't know you can do. So that's really a great tip there too.
Yeah, I had another question. It's more, well, I'm super curious about the industry because it's such a strange industry, but how did you actually become a casting director? Like, how does that path work?
Yeah, it's very different now than it was when I became a casting director, I started the journey about 20 years ago. So I was an actor, and then 9/11 happened, and I was like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Mm.
But I didn't want to let go of, I was tired of the grind. I was tired of like schlepping my props up and down Broadway and, waiting tables and all that stuff. Um, I'd been on Broadway. I had a Broadway credit and off Broadway and stuff like that. I didn't want to do it anymore, but I still wanted to. I loved actors and writers and directors, and so I just started interning. I just looked up who was looking for an intern, and I ended up interning for like the biggest casting director in New York. At the time was Hopkins Smith Barden, and they cast Gwyneth Paltrow in Shakespeare in Love, and they cast Halle Berry in Monsters Ball, and they cast Glenn Close in the one where she anyway. They cast a lot of Oscar winning actresses. Anyway, so I was their intern, and I learned a lot. And then I just sort of made my way up, and I moved to LA, and was an intern again and an intern again. So like I've been in so many offices, like I see how things got done, and then I became an assistant, and I was an assistant at NBC internally, in their casting department, overseeing, 20 casting directors. So I got to see that. And then from there, I went on, and I've worked for just huge, huge casting companies. And you just kind of slowly make your way up the ladder. You become an assistant, and then an associate, and then co-casting, and then head casting. And so then I was a head casting director for a while. Um, but I mean, it's not unlike being an actor. It's like a gig, it's gig to gig. If
Yeah.
your show gets canceled, you're not a casting director anymore. So you're always looking for other things, and I pivot, I do television, and then I'll pivot to film, and then I'll pivot to then I'll be developing things that may or may not get a pilot, and then I pivot to being to video games, and then I pivoted to doing an audio, book and stuff like that. So it's just, you have to just keep going. And I did a play this past summer.
Yeah.
So
So
but you
what
can't really do what I did anymore because like I was able to be an intern, and you
yeah.
can't be an intern anymore. They don't have that anymore because of the liability. Because there was a big, big scandal with interns like in 2010, and we all got a call from all the studios saying, send your interns home. We can't have interns anymore because these two interns sued Fox and they won. And so anyway, so it was a big thing. So
Wow.
there's no path like that anymore.
What's your suggestion for actors of how they can build like genuine relationships with casting directors that are not like, please see me, like actually genuine?
Yeah, I mean, you do things like this. You do panels. If you can follow them on Instagram, it's not a weird thing to follow them on Instagram because they wouldn't be on Instagram if they weren't, they have their professional accounts. So you want to follow them, and then, comment on the things that you see them say. This is all a game of subconscious subterfuge. It's not really about, me meeting you right now, Victoria, and going, "Oh, Victoria would be perfect for this thing I'm casting." It's really just you're imprinting on me right now, right? I'm getting sort of an imprint. And then later, months from now, when I've totally forgotten that I've even done this panel, your little face is going to come past me, in a submission, and I won't know why, but oh, let's try her. Let's click on you, right? And then it all goes from there. So it's more about just accumulating impressions. So that's like even when you're following somebody on Instagram, like you may post a comment on my Instagram and somewhere in the back of my mind, I'm seeing your name, Victoria Hagney, and I don't remember it at the time, but then later when I'm looking, it's had an effect, even if I can't remember where I know you from. So that's kind of what it's just like marketing, right? Any advertising person will tell you. That's why that's how people market and you start, you call something Kleenex. Why do we call it Kleenex? It's just a tissue, but it's a Kleenex, right? Like you get imprinted on certain names and stuff like that. So, as far as having authentic relationships, it's hard because not many of us have offices anymore. So, you're not coming in person, you're not bullshitting with the assistant, you're not, whatever. Those kinds of relationships aren't there. So, you have to seek out other ones. You have to go to film festivals, you have to go to events, you have to, go to screenings and go to plays and try to do as much in real life stuff as you can based on where you are. But otherwise, you want to do things like this. You want to go to things where people are being guests places and just try to get as many impressions and imprints as you can for the later time when you're going to be submitted for something.
So in terms of that, like I feel I've heard from a few different sources that like representation really is key. Like you're missing opportunities without it that you just don't see from like a self-submission side. So is that really true? Like like you need representation, like period, right? Like to see auditions you're not gonna see without it.
Yeah. I mean, you're not seeing anything that that people are doing because it's not put out on Actors Access. It's only put out on Breakdown, which only goes to agents and managers and only ones that are SAG franchised or ATM franchise. Those are professional organizations that vet, like I was working and I was working on the series and also on the movie that's shooting in Nashville. There are a couple of local agents there, not Talent Track, but another was an agent there who was like begging me to just send me her clients directly because she wasn't allowed to be on Breakdown,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
Because she's not SAG franchised, because there's not enough SAG actors in wherever her little area is. So, and it was kind of tough, I allowed that and I allowed that, but it's like, there's a reason why those gates are up, because they're trying, those platforms are trying to protect actors from predatory people just hanging out their shingles saying, "Hi, I'm a manager." And
Hmm.
they've also been burned because some actors pretend to be managers because they want to get
Okay.
access to the breakdown of professional jobs, right?
Ooh.
And so, the platforms are like, no, we have to protect our casting directors and our productions. You can't just be an actor and call yourself a manager and be able to see, it's a gatekeeping system, right? And we do that for a reason because, we're submitting to agents, and we're submitting to them agents and managers because they're supposed to have clients that are good and that are
Yeah.
professional, right? So it's a vetting process. There's a reason why the gates are there. It's not to be unfair. It's that so, allegedly, all of the people who get submitted for my job postings, for my roles, are
Hmm.
good. And they have great materials and they have experience and they're professional and they're trained and they know how to be on a set and they're not going to be idiots and they're not going to be, terrible and act
Totally.
badly and show up drunk and show up late and you know and quite frankly, and when I am working in a small market, of course I put things out on Breakdown, but I also put them out on Actors Access. So, Tina's agent sees the roles that I'm putting out, but I'm also putting them out on Actors Access. And on this last TV show, I booked an actress directly. She didn't have an agent or manager. We thought she was great. We booked her for the role. She didn't
Mhm.
show up for her day of shooting.
Told you guys.
Okay.
Told
Wow.
you what happened.
And they had nobody. I mean, they tried to call her, but normally they would be able to call her agent. And, and it was just like, it was really a shame and it was completely her fault, even for a variety of reasons. she dropped the ball and she wasn't professional enough to know how to ask the questions that she needed to know what her call time was and stuff like that. And so if
Yeah.
she had an agent, they would definitely have been like, when's her call time? She hasn't gotten this, she hasn't gotten that, you know.
Yeah. Make
But
sure you do that.
but
Yeah.
yeah, so you know,
That's
so that's the reason why there are gatekeepers, and that, you know, if she did have an agent, then I would have had been more confident that she knew what she was doing and she knew when to be somewhere, you know?
No, that totally makes sense.
Veterans.
And just kind of piggybacking off of that, something I struggle with is like I see casting directors and I like what they're doing and I want to be in rooms with them. And then I'm looking for representation and I can't sometimes figure out what which agents, you know, casting directors are calling. And I don't know if there's like a way to maybe like think about that or look for that. But, you know, sometimes it's a bit tricky to figure out.
It's a very easy way.
Okay,
Look
great.
look up the cast that they
Yeah.
cast, right? Look up the
Okay.
actors and look up their agents.
Got it. Okay, so like, you know, look up the casting director, what they've cast, and then you can kind of see it like that on like IMDb Pro type
Yep,
thing.
if you go on IMDb Pro, you will see what they cast. You will see the whole cast, you know, every actor, and you click on
Mhm.
the actor, and it'll tell you who their agent and manager is. But I can tell you from my study, like in general, when it comes to like, you know, co-stars and even guest stars, I'd never found a statistical importance of the agent. That you just need an agent. But
Yeah.
it's not like there's one agency that always that I found in my study that like,
Mhm.
oh, all the Luber Rockland clients, they always book, or all the UTA, or all the this or
Yeah.
that. That I didn't really find that. I mean, when it comes to the offer, if you know what I mean by offer only, like people like you're a level of actor, you're not going to be auditioning anymore. It's just an offer. I mean, yeah, they're with the top agencies, the CAAs and the UTAs, and to some extent the
Yeah.
APAs. That. But that's not really what we're talking about here. We're talking about just the regular actor who's going to be, you know, lots of
Mhm.
co-stars, lots of guest stars, hoping for that recurring, hoping for the chance to be a series regular or to be, you know, one of the leads in a film or something like that. I
Yeah.
mean, you know, just find somebody who will represent you. But I think a smart thing to do, especially if you see an independent film and it's like, oh, wow, I love this role. Who's that actress? Who are they with? You know, you want to try to make your way, you know, into ever rising circles. But at first, you know, I wouldn't worry about it too much. Just get yourself started to be submitted. You just need to get into the game. Right now, you're not in the game. You can always change your agent. You know, you can always
Yeah.
find, you can, but you just have to start. But what I would do is, you know, what I tell my students is like when they're strategizing on representation, who represents the people you like? And I don't mean like Jennifer Lawrence or, you know, somebody.
Yeah.
Where do you see yourself the next platform, you know, platforming in? Who represents those people?
No, that is such good advice. Thank you so much.
Okay, we're going to take the last two questions. Your hands have been up, and my goodness, Lisa, I can't tell you how much we appreciate having you here.
Good.
Thank you for being so thorough, answering these questions in such detail. We just really appreciate it. It was Brooklyn and then Laura.
So I just wanted to ask, this is kind of a broad question. It's more about the industry as a whole. What do you see currently? There's been a lot going on with the industry itself, with AI, and then there were strikes and all of that, and it's been kind of slow this past year. Auditions here and there, different kinds of projects. What do you see like for the future of cinema, and what do you encourage us actors in this season that's just a little bit topsy-turvy? What could you give us? Um, a nugget of wisdom, something for us to continue forward in this unsteady kind of time.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly don't know if there was ever been a time when it's steady. My whole career, every season, everybody's like, there's not enough work. You know, there's never been a time when people were like, oh, there's too much work. I have too many auditions. You know what I mean? So it's
Yeah.
like, you know, if you're like my client Cameron that I was saying, for him, like it's really, really busy, right? And for some people, it's not. So but I would say that right now everybody is really freaking out in LA that there's, you know, production is way down here. There's all this production that is happening overseas in Ireland and, you know, in the UK and in, you know, in Europe. in Australia, that a lot of production is moving over there, and that's 100% true. It is. So if you can work in those markets, then you should. But as you probably know, a lot of production is coming to the Southeast, right? Lots of production happening, or more production happening, in all those places because of the tax rebates. So if you can be in those pools, that's, I would seriously recommend that because that's where you're going to be able to actually book things. You're going to be less likely to book something that is not a local hire, right? You're not going to be competitive in the LA market because there's just too many people. The difference when in my movie, when we were casting a role that could be from anywhere, that's where you get 5,000 submissions for one role. When it has to be a local hire, you're getting 500 submissions or 100 or 300, right? So that's a strategy. But yeah, you need to make your own work. That's one thing too. You need to be, doing independent film. If you're not working, write something, do something, shoot something. Um, as far as AI goes, I'm very, very worried about AI. I don't think we have nearly enough protections. Yes, are actors protected from their image getting reused? Yes. But I was given, access to a prototype of something that I could type in, young, 20 something, ethnically diverse, female barista, super cool, handing me a cup of coffee. And that AI program generated a completely photorealistic character. And if I paid it money, it would talk, it could say lines in whatever voice I wanted. Okay. So that's what I'm worried about. Now, that's not going to replace the leads in a film or, the series regular or even necessarily the guest star, but it could absolutely replace some of the roles that you guys are going to get first, which is that barista going, "Here's your coffee." It can absolutely replace you doing that. And there's no guardrail because that digital actor isn't ripped off from any of you. It's an amalgamation of like a million faces, right? So that's what I'm really worried about. And I'm worried about it as a casting director too, because they don't need a casting director to cast that. They just put the prompt in. So
Wow.
that's something that I brought up to my union, and like nobody was ready to talk about that. So that's what I'm worried about because it's going to start happening, where that's where they can really cut a lot of the bottom line by getting rid of all those little roles of a little nurse coming in to say, "Here's your thing, doctor," or a little this, a little that doesn't have to be a human. That's what I'm worried about. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Great.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Last question. Thanks, Brooklyn. Great question. Laura.
That was a perfect segue because I was going to ask about the union. Um, I just became SAG eligible and I'm just learning, what that might look like. Thank you. And even I'm curious if that played into your statistics that you looked at of, in your casting, as well as just any thoughts around being SAG.
No, I mean, well, most in my study, the majority of those actors were either SAG eligible or SAG, because at that time it's very hard. Well, at that time we were kind of discouraged from hiring any non-union person because you have to Taft-Hartley them, and the show can get fined for Taft-Hartleying somebody. It's not a huge fine, but it's enough of a fine that the line producer like just doesn't want to deal with it, and they don't want to get a call from SAG saying, "Why are you turning so many non-union actors union?" It's a whole thing. It's such a catch-22 because like on the one hand, the union needs as many members as possible financially, but the members don't want a lot of members because then it's more competition, so it's like it fights with itself. But and look, when I'm casting in Nashville and Chattanooga, I have to hire non-union. I just have to because the pool is so small. You're going to be turning a lot of people Taft-Hartley, and like the production just has to know that, otherwise then you got to let me open up the pool and travel in. You're going to pay one way or the other. You're either going to pay the fine or you're going to have to fly and house people,
Yeah.
So, but that's not really something for you to worry about. I mean, it's great that you're eligible. Right now, you're in that sweet, sweet spot where you get the best of both worlds.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and not being in LA, there's a lot of non-union where I am as well. So
it is 8:07. So this was just super, super, super. Lisa, once again, thank you for this.